My name's Lance Strate. I'm on the Faculty of Communication and Media Studies at Fordham University. My normal haunt is somewhat north of here in the Bronx, and we also have a campus just a little south of here, down by Lincoln Center. And actually that's where we'll be holding our 6th annual Media Ecology Association convention this June. It's June 22nd to 26th. And there are flyers on the edge of the stage. On one side is the pre-registration form for that conference. On the other side is a membership form. I'm running the convention along with Janet Sternberg, my colleague, who's sitting in the audience there. Hi, Janet. And also, I'm the president of the Media Ecology Association. So if you do end up going and you have any complaints, I guess you can take them to me. Anyway, I want to thank you for inviting me to participate in this colloquium, and thanks especially to Alan Flagg, whose energy and enthusiasm is an inspiration. This is my first experience with the Alfred Korzybski Memorial Lecture and Colloquium, but I do have 3 decades of experience with general semantics. It goes back to the first semester of my first year in college, which is back in 1974. I took an Introduction to Communication class, and it was there that I first encountered Korzybski's non-Aristotelian system. And that same course introduced me to a number of other ideas that stuck with me over the years. For example, there was Edward Sapir and Benjamin Lee Whorf's notion that the language we speak has an inherent worldview. Thank you. Water. And there was general systems theory with its holistic ecological approach to the world, and there were ideas about media and technology from scholars such as Marshall McLuhan, Harold Innis, and Jacques Ellul. I continued my studies of communication, media, and technology, first at Queens College, just over the East River, then in the doctoral program in media ecology downtown at New York University. There I studied with Neil Postman and with Christine Nystrom, who just brought me that water. Thank you, Chris. I went there to study McLuhan, Innis, and Ellul, but I was delighted to find when I got there that general semantics was also part of the curriculum. In fact, Neil and Chris asked all their students to join the International Society for General Semantics, which I did when I started the program, and to do so because we would receive the journal, etc., which Postman was editing at the time. In fact, every class I took there, the assignment was to write an article for etc., suitable for publishing and etc., that's how I ended up with 2 of my earliest publications. So I'm quite pleased to be here today and to try to bring general semantics and media ecology back together once again. And I do have to confess to you that the topic of my talk, which is the future of consciousness, was given to me by Alan Flagg. It's a challenging assignment, I have to admit that, and much of what I have to say will be a review, reaching back to that freshman course that I took and back to my seminars with Neil and Chris. And I think it's essential to first establish a basis for considering the future of consciousness before I actually can get to the topic, so I hope you'll bear with me. And if you don't like what I have to say, it's my sincere hope that you hold Alan Flagg personally responsible. You know, consciousness is a curious topic to consider, for it once places us in the realm of self-reflexiveness. It's the mind thinking about the mind, which is not very different from the blind leading the blind. I'm at once reminded of the self-reflexive paradox that if the human brain were so simple that we could understand it, we would be so simple that we could not. It's a basic tenet of systems theory that you cannot completely understand a system from within. The whole is greater than the sum of its parts, and you have to step outside of the system in order to see the whole. I try to think of that whenever I'm stuck in traffic coming over the George Washington Bridge. I live in New Jersey, I work in New York, and I find myself stuck in what appears to be a completely random and unexplainable traffic jam. It's like if only everyone would just start driving at 30 miles per hour, we'd be fine. And you know, when you're stuck in bumper-to-bumper traffic, you have to do something to pass the time. So I try to imagine a distant bird's eye view of the systems of roads and highways that surround my position, you know, knowing that in all probability, if I had that view, I'd see a rather orderly traffic pattern, a rhythmic pulsing along the arteries of New York. That's the stop and start. Of course, if I could just step outside of the system, I wouldn't be stuck in traffic in the first place. I'm forced to contemplate these things. You know, the problem is that sometimes there's no way to get outside of the system. Sometimes you find yourself on a highway with no exits. Truly an existential dilemma. That's why it's impossible for us to imagine or truly understand death. We cannot step outside of our own existential system. So many people cling to the notion of life after death because we cannot imagine death after life. We can't leave the system, so we imagine more of the same system, more or less. But to insist that there is no life after death would be equally unwarranted, as we can neither confirm nor deny what lies beyond our system. I think it was Pliny the Elder who said, the only certainty is uncertainty. The problem we face in asking the mind to reflect upon itself in these various ways also relates to the mathematician Kurt Gödel's incompleteness theorem, which shows that no mathematical or logical system is entirely free of contradiction or capable of proving its own validity. There must always be recourse to something outside of the system. And this also brings us back to Bertrand Russell and Alfred North Whitehead's theory of logical types, and the premise that a category cannot be a member of itself unless you want to invite paradox. So to avoid paradox when we think about consciousness, we need to move from inside the category to outside of it, to consciousness about consciousness. But how do we do this? How do we go meta, as Douglas Rushkoff raised this familiar question simply as a ploy to gain your sympathy? I want to impress upon you the difficulty of what I'm attempting to do here today. General semantics asks us to maintain an extensional orientation, that is, an orientation based on observation of the outside world. But consciousness is entirely an internal, intentional phenomenon. Our understanding of consciousness is based on our own subjective examination of our own consciousness and on inferences and logical reasoning in lieu of empirical evidence. In other words, I cannot avoid applying an intentional orientation to an intentional phenomenon. But further complicating the matter is the fact that consciousness refers, as a word, refers to a number of different concepts, so that we would be well advised to use the general semantics device of turning singular nouns